Welcome to GovCast, connecting with federal IT's top decision makers. I'm Alexander Bolova, production lead at GovCIO Media and Research. With me today is staff writer researcher Jordan McDonald. Hi, Jordan.
Hi, Alex.
You had the opportunity to chat with Andrew Fichter, Deputy Director of VA's Lighthouse program. How'd it go?
It went well. It's a really interesting program that Andrew oversees. Lighthouse is a API application programming interface platform. Basically, his job is creating a platform that not only the VA, but also its third-party partners can use when they're building, experiences and platforms for veterans. For instance, basically, when a veteran opens their medical health records and looks for, let's say, anything that they're using to talk to doctors or just checking their records, like the VA and Lighthouse are the ones who build those platforms. And so Andrew's job is sort of behind the scenes, but really critical for the work that the VA does in terms of providing healthcare to veterans and also making sure their data is secure.
Yeah, and to go back just a few steps, for our listeners who don't know, could you tell me what APIs are?
Yeah, it's an application programming interface. Basically, when you open an app, that's an API. And it's really just back-end stuff, not sort of the thing that's flashy or, makes headlines, but really critical for when we're talking about the veteran experience.
Gotcha. And did Andrew give examples of how VA's Lighthouse program is improving the customer experience?
Yeah, Lighthouse sort of serves as what he called a sandbox environment for developers to try and build their own APIs within the VA using VA data, try it out, test it out before it goes live to veterans. So, for example, when a veteran pulls up their health records through something like Apple Health on their iPhone or other iOS device, Lighthouse is responsible for helping build that out.
In other words, Lighthouse provides developers with the tools and the resources to make sure that what they develop is ultimately going to work for and with VA. There isn't any kind of guessing around. It's kind of like a guaranteed functionality.
Yeah, precisely that, actually.
Well, I'm very excited to hear more about this program. So let's not keep our audience waiting. Let's take a listen to your conversation.
Hi, welcome to GovCast. I'm Jordan McDonald, staff writer with GovCIO Media and Research. Today, I'm joined by Andrew Fichter, Deputy Director of the Lighthouse Developer Experience Program at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Hi, Andrew. Thanks for coming on to the show.
Hey, Jordan. Yeah, really glad to be here and excited to talk about Lighthouse today.
Absolutely. Lighthouse is a really fascinating program, but we've only talked about it a little bit at GovCIO Media and Research. So could you sort of give us a rundown on what it is and what makes it so important to the VA's operations?
Yeah, so Lighthouse we are a large program at VA. We've been a full-fledged program since 2019, and basically we started off as a public-facing API platform in 2019, and the whole idea of having a public-facing API platform came from a huge project leading up to 2019 to redesign and relaunch VA.gov. So VA.gov, before 2017, 2018, before it was relaunched, was kind of what you would think of for a traditional government website. If you were a veteran and you went to VA.gov, you would have a hard time finding information that might be useful to you. It was more geared towards internal VA employees, a lot of the content. So VA.gov was redesigned to bring put the veteran back into the front and center, and to make it easier for them to access the benefits and services that VA provides to them as veterans. And as part of that whole project, there was a lot of modernization that had to happen in order to get VA.gov to work. We needed to, a lot of APIs had to be built to talk to other systems at VA to get data and present it on the website for veterans, or to provide interaction. And so the team that was building VA.gov kind of had this idea, well, we're building all these APIs to make VA.gov work and to integrate with other VA systems. Why don't we make these APIs public facing so that third parties outside of VA can can use these APIs to build innovative applications that VA doesn't have the budget for, the time for, the expertise for, or VA might not even have the idea for, to be honest. And there's a precedent for this too in the commercial sector. Google has an API platform. A lot of any big organization likely has an API platform, like a digital organization. Another big one is Twilio. Twilio does a lot of integrations for SMS texting for applications. They have a big API platform. So there was a lot of precedent for what we were trying to do. There wasn't precedent in the federal government, but in the commercial sector there was. So the team, the engineering lead that was running the whole VA.gov project, he basically took on the momentum to build this pilot for a public-facing API platform. And they did a tour out to Silicon Valley. They talked to companies like Twilio to learn about, what top organizations in the commercial sector are doing to build effective API platforms. And so one of the first APIs that was launched on VA on Lighthouse was called the Benefits Intake API. The Benefits Intake API basically allows benefit application forms and supporting documentation to be submitted to VA digitally, rather than having to print out a paper form and mail it to the VA and then have it processed manually. That's just a little bit of the backstory of how Lighthouse got started. Our objective at the time in 2019, basically when I joined VA in 2019, along with my colleague Dave Masick, who's the director of the program. We both started it on the same day at VA, and our task was basically to take this little pilot program that didn't really have more than like a year's worth of funding, and to grow it into something that could be sustained, and that could grow and really help VA. And so over the past 5 years since Dave and I have been here at VA, I think there's been a lot of progress made, and we've also learned a lot and taken a few different directions too, based on what we've learned, which I can talk about later on in this interview.
Yeah, I mean, that's all really exciting. Could you sort of give me an understanding of how Lighthouse works in terms of working with those third parties? How does it enable developers to build tools that could help VA, I guess, outside of the VA and then bring it over?
Yeah, so an analogy I like to think of for APIs is a wall socket. This is actually a pretty popular analogy. I'm not going to take credit for it. But basically, if you think of a plug in the wall, right? You're plugging in a vacuum cleaner, you could be plugging in a blow dryer, whatever it is you're plugging in, you're getting electricity that's powering the thing, right? It doesn't matter how the electricity is generated. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. You just know that there's a standard where there's a plug that follows, there's a socket that meets a certain standard, and there's a plug that you put into the socket that meets that standard as well. And then it just works once you plug it in, right? You get your power, the blow dryer turns on, and you don't need to be concerned about anything else about how that power got there. And so APIs are kind of like that, right? It's you can think of an API as providing access to data or functionality in a very standardized way that computers can talk to each other very easily using the standard. But it's also easy for humans too to understand APIs as well. Like if you look at an API specification, I'm not going to go into the weeds of that. So basically, an API is just a way to seamlessly interface with an organization or data, or be able to transact digitally in a very standardized, easy to understand way.
Yeah. I was just sort of curious how Lighthouse works in terms of enabling developers to work in the API.
Okay. Yes. So we have a public-facing API portal, developer.va.gov. Anybody who has access to the internet can go there. You can go there from your phone or from an internet browser, and that provides, when you get to that site, that's really geared towards third-party developers who are building solutions. And so they can go and browse the API catalog, and then they can easily, in a very self-service way, get access to a sandbox environment. Just by filling out a quick form on developer.va.gov, they get a credential and they're automatically able to start building their application. And so an example, I gave the example of the benefits intake API. There's a lot of veteran service organizations that support veterans with doing things like applying for disability compensation or applying for a VA benefit. So it's a very complex process. If a veteran has to fill out a form to apply for VA benefits, a lot of the times there might be missing information on their initial submission, or there might be information that could have helped them get a higher benefit that they didn't provide or they didn't know to provide. And then it starts this whole really long process where a veteran submits the form to VA, and then VA might take a while to process it and get back to them. There might be more information needed. Then the veteran has to send that information back. All of this can take, a really long time. And with APIs, we're able to kind of take that whole process and make it digital. So, veteran service organizations, there's a lot of them out there today. We have a really good saturation into that market with our APIs. So we do have a lot of the big players that build software for veteran service organizations that have integrated with our APIs and allow veterans to digitally submit claims to VA or apply for benefits to VA with the help of a representative who's helping them provide the optimal information that they need in order to be successful.
Absolutely. And, you mentioned that this API is self-service in a sense, and, it allows developers to operate in a sandbox environment. Could you sort of explain to me what that sandbox environment is and why it's important for this API to be self-service rather than being, overseen and managed by the VA at a more micro level?
Yeah. So I'll start by answering that it's all in the name of our program, Lighthouse Developer Experience, right? We're really trying to make it easy for developers, both inside VA and outside VA, to build good digital solutions. And so the sandbox environment is basically, it's a fully integrated environment where you can build an API and you can test it within that environment. Or you can build an application that uses one of the Lighthouse APIs. So let's take the example of a software vendor building processing software for veteran service organizations. So this is like the software that runs on the computers that veteran service officers use while they're helping veterans apply for benefits to VA. And so if you're building an integration in that software to one of our APIs, the sandbox environment basically provides a seamless and self-service way as a developer building that integration to be able to have all the information you need. Ideally, the API is very well documented on va.gov or developer.va.gov, and it's really easy for another developer who's building an application that uses that API to understand it. And then with the self-service sandbox access and the sandbox environment, they're able to actually do fully integrated testing of how that API is going to work before they actually launch it in production. So yeah, really, it's a way to enable developers to have an environment where they can build their functionality and really easily test it and verify that it works, and make sure they have everything they need before they launch it production.
Yeah, absolutely. And, thinking about the amount of, I guess, patient health data that the VA is, the custodian of, when you're building these API systems, what sort of data are you using in these like sandbox environments? And then, I guess, how are you making sure that it's secure? I mean, this is really important data for veterans. How are you making sure that, when the API is being used by third parties, that it's useful for the developers, but also secure for veterans and their health?
Yeah, so security is obviously extremely important. I mean, when you're talking about sharing veteran data outside of VA, we want to make sure that whoever is using the data is, they're being good stewards of the data. So third-party applications, we have a very rigorous process. First, so I'll talk about a few different layers of this, how we ensure security. One is vetting those third parties. We have a very rigorous approval process. Once a third party, gets access to Sandbox, I mentioned that's all self-service. But for them to actually go live in production, we have a really rigorous approval process where we review their terms of service, we review their privacy policies, because again, we're providing veteran data to these organizations, and we ultimately want the veteran to be in control of their data. We want them to know who has their data, what they're doing with their data, who they might share that data with. And all that ties back to the privacy policy in terms of service for these organizations. So we do have cases where, we go through this whole approval process, and we might ask for some changes or adjustments to be made on the third party side, just to make sure that the data it's secure and they're not sharing it, they're not selling it, they're not monetizing it, et cetera. And that veterans do have a way to revoke access to that data for these third parties if they need to at some point. So that's on the consumer side. On the veteran side as well, this is obviously really important too. We don't want to put something out there that would let somebody impersonate a veteran and be able to apply for benefits on behalf of a veteran and then defraud VA. And I know that's something that's top of mind, especially with just how lucrative and how much money there is in the Veteran Benefits Administration and the vulnerability of the veteran population. It's it's definitely a place where there's a lot of fraud. And so we want to make sure that we know who the veteran is, we know they are who they say they are, and we're providing them full ability to consent to sharing that data with a third party outside of VA. And so for that, we use NIST and a lot of the top web standards that are in place today. So like we use NIST 863 for authentication. We use OAuth 2.0 for authorization. And these are all very technical terms, but they're basically technical standards that are in place today that are used all across the commercial sector that ensure, like with OAuth, it's basically a digital credential that would be equivalent to a veteran physically showing up at a desk and having somebody hand them whatever data it is that they're looking for. With OAuth and the consent flow that we go through, we know that at the time an API, at the time a third party is requesting data from our API for a veteran, that due to this OAuth consent that we've got from the veteran, that we know that they've authorized us to share this data, and we know that the veteran themselves are the ones that asked for us to share that data. And so, yeah, that's obviously top of mind. We have a lot of research as well where we've validated with veterans that they do trust VA and that they trust VA's, that we are being good stewards for them, and that if we're offering the ability to connect to a third party, that it's safe and they do trust us. So that's also encouraging.
That's awesome. You talked about it throughout the security question, but also I wanted to ask beyond that too. You're thinking about the amount of data that's being used, the different parties that are being interacted with here. What are some of the challenges when it comes to implementing or even just developing Lighthouse?
Yeah, it's a lot of challenges. When we launched the public API platform, really the goal was for us to be a platform, and we provide a place for other teams in VA to build APIs and put them onto our platform and expose them to third parties. What we've seen, one, is that there's a lot of fear tied to that. There's obviously security, as we talked about, is very top of mind. And if you're a team who owns a system, who has data, and you're talking about sharing that data outside of VA, then security is something that you don't want to be. You want to make sure you have all your T's crossed and your I's dotted. And a lot of the teams might not be in that position, and they might not therefore be as willing to publish an API and share it publicly. There's also concerns and challenges with data quality. We have 600,000 employees total. I think VA OIT, Office of Information Technology, has 8,000 government employees and another probably close to equal, if not equal or more, amount of contractors. And so with that, you can see like how big VA is. And there's, hundreds of, if not over 1,000 IT systems within VA. And there's redundant systems, and obviously there's a breadth of data quality across those systems as well. And so when you're talking about exposing data outside VA, you want to make sure that the data is good, and that we're not going to be providing false information or inaccurate information through our APIs. So data quality is a big one, making sure that we're working with systems to ensure that their data is of high quality and sufficient for public use. Also, system reliability and performance is a challenge. As I mentioned, you have hundreds, if not over 1,000 systems here at VA. A lot of them are very old, and a lot of them maybe don't have the burden of having public consumption or public access to those systems or to that underlying data. And so if a system, maybe a database, goes down for maintenance on a Friday night, if you're a veteran and you're trying to do something that might involve getting data from that system, it'll fail, right? So reliability and performance is a challenge as well. And then, like getting an API response back within, a few seconds versus 60 seconds, right? If you have like a slow system behind the scenes. Working through that is a challenge. And then just integration patterns are also challenging. You have a lot of legacy systems at VA who have always gone through integration testing and, moving things up the chain into production through a certain pathway, and that's not always consistent as well within VA, like which environments different teams use, and so there could be some discomfort around any change in that front. And then just policy, right? Like ATO authority to operate, right? Want to make sure that whatever system is putting data out has an authority to operate, that it's documented, and that that there's basically going to be doing what's best for the veteran. So those are some of the challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've talked about a lot of the ways that Lighthouse has been effective in helping developers test their APIs before, they get distributed to veterans as a whole. Could you sort of run me through some of the real world examples where it made it out of the testing stage and then is directly helping veterans now and today?
Yeah. So one would be a big one that we'd like to talk about a lot. That's really easy to understand and to see the benefit of is our integration, or is our health API, right? We have a patient health API, which if you're a veteran and you use VA healthcare at all, then you have health records with VA, right? But there's a large portion of the veteran community who also get care through the community, right? Outside of the Veterans Health Administration healthcare that we provide. And so if you want to see all of your health information consolidated and aggregated in one place, such as like a third-party app like Apple Health or Samsung Health on an Android phone, you wouldn't be able to do that without our health API, right? And so we provide the patient health API that provides veteran patient health records to third parties so that they can aggregate. And we do have that integration with Apple Health, and we have tens of thousands of veterans using that today, right? That have their VA health records pulled into the Apple Health app on their iPhone. So you could open up the Apple Health app. You can see all of your health records, regardless of the provider. As long as you have Apple Health pulling that data in, you can see it all in one place. And it really helps as you're getting care in the community. If you're a veteran and you're going to a doctor outside of the Veterans Health Administration, that doctor will be able to help you a lot more if the veteran can talk to them holistically and share their health information from VA as well.
Absolutely. Well, those are all the questions I had. I guess the last one I wanted to ask is, could you sort of give us a rundown of where the future of Lighthouse is? What are you looking to do in the future with building new APIs, new systems, ensuring patient data security?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned that we wanted to be an API platform more so than, we didn't want to build APIs ourselves on this program. We want to offer a platform so that other teams within VA can build good APIs. And we can really, a rising tide lifts all boats, I guess. Like we can provide this platform that will help a bunch of other teams in VA. And, we've learned with the public platform, we have learned that there's value there. There's great value there, even for internal VA teams. Because we do have about 150, we have over 150 apps in production consuming our APIs on the public platform, but about a third of those consumers are actually internal VA teams. And so what that tells us is, if internal VA teams are coming to our public API platform to integrate with other VA systems, then there must be a need for better for a platform on the internal side that would allow them to do that without having to rely on a public platform. And And so we built what's called Lighthouse Delivery Infrastructure. That's a cloud-based delivery platform. It allows teams to build modern APIs or other digital products and containerize them and put them in the VA Enterprise Cloud. And it allows them to do this very seamlessly. And we also, as part of that, we also need to make sure that if we're providing a pathway for teams to build good software more efficiently within VA, we also need to have a pathway for them to authorize that software to run in production. I mentioned ATOs earlier, authority to operate. Mm-hmm. Anything that's built needs to have an authority to operate, and that is a very long and tedious process. And we wanted to affect change there as well. So we built a pipeline into our delivery platform that does automated security scanning, code scanning on any code that's being deployed into production. And we also have security control assessors working with those teams as part of this whole platform. And that we've actually been able to help teams build new applications and be authorized to run in production in a fraction of the time. Right now in VA, it takes over 500 days on average to get an ATO, but we've seen it happen within 6 months on our program using the platform that we built and the tools that we have in place. And so really, we've also built a internal developer portal called Code VA, which we're growing that really aggressively, and that's really meant to help teams at VA get access to the information that they need to build good software, basically. So a lot of our focus is on that, but then also, continuing to grow and evolve the public platform and make sure that third parties outside VA also have access to, a really great set of APIs here that allow them to innovate and build things that make life better for veterans.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to share the amazing things that you're doing with Lighthouse. Glad to have you on the show and looking forward to seeing what comes next in the future.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks, Jordan. It's great talking to you.
Thank you, Jordan. That was a terrific conversation with Andrew Fichter. Before we let our listeners go, do you have any last highlights or takeaways that you want to leave them with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that I really wanted to highlight is that Andrew really made sure to put emphasis on that, like when Lighthouse is being built for developers, it's important that, as they use the VA's data, that they're being good stewards of it. And so, Andrew was very adamant about the security protocols that are set in place for VA and Lighthouse. And I think it's important for listeners to understand that, like, even though VA is working with third-party partners to build out these applications, they still have a lot of the same things that other parts of the VA have in mind when it comes to the importance of protecting and securing veteran data.
Yeah, and I know we talk a lot about data here on the podcast, and it really is that fine line between having what you need to develop things that are going to improve the customer experience, but without saying too much about the customer, ultimately. So it sounds like it's a really fine balancing act, but ultimately going to be very beneficial going forward. Well, thank you again, Jordan. Listeners can tune in next week for a brand new podcast in our GovCIO Media and Research podcast feed. But in the meantime, if you like what you heard, make sure you leave a review and a 5-star rating on the podcast platform of your choice. We also have a giant archive of previous podcasts. So if you want to learn more about what's happening at the VA, all you have to do is scroll down and you'll find many more interviews. I'm Alexander Bolova.
And I'm Jordan McDonald.
Thank you for listening. GovCast, along with HealthCast and CyberCast, is a production of GovCIO Media and Research. To explore our content, visit our website, govciomedia.com. Keep an eye out for new episodes every Tuesday. And if you like what you heard, leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. Have a topic you want us to discuss? Contact us at newsletter@govcio.com.